What is up, everybody? Welcome to a very special live edition of the Poker News podcast. I know you never expected to have the live edition of the Poker News podcast take place in 2020, but we are all here at the Rio All Suite Hotel and Casino because last night we were all here for the 2020 World Series of Poker main event. Chad and I were obviously here for PokerNews.com, your favorite
Cool
site.
mask, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to be the responsible one here.
We were all COVID tested.
Yeah,
We all tested
I can
negative.
Take this off.
There we go.
But we do,
Nice plug, though.
Yeah, Poker News masks. Floptheworld.com is where you can get yours.
Oh my gosh, it's so awkward. Anyways, you guys, so we were all here last night. It was a totally different experience, obviously, and, we'll share with you about that. We've got some really kind of shocking and surprising news to talk to you guys a little bit about, as well as, some of the things we expected, some of the shocks, the horrors, and also the joys. I have to say, last night was just a real privilege to be a part of, and even Ty Stewart, I saw at the end of the night last night.
Yeah.
He teared up a little bit. We'll talk.
Wow.
I know. I thought he had a heart of stone, but I was wrong. All right, so let's start first. Jeff, you were looking fly in your outfit, and you had a very important job.
I did. So we had talked about this last week that I would be conducting some of the interviews just in one of the rooms for our featured interviews. So when you cut to a 15-second soundbite during the ESPN broadcast, you would see and listen to that player's quick soundbite, and that's it. And then a day before, our producer Dan Gotti calls me, says, Maria can't make it. Would you perhaps like to do sideline reporting for the ESPN episodes? I'm like, let me think about I would. And, they've got to go pretty far down on the depth chart in the Poker Central ranks to get to me, but I was very appreciative, fortunate to have that opportunity.
It's like when the Browns' entire wide receiver core, they had to go to the practice squad
Everybody
to fill
was
the
out.
roster.
Yeah, and so eventually they had to call on me, right? I'm just sitting there. Then eventually I get the call. I'm just hanging out in the bullpen. Nice sports reference just for you, and there we go. So it's terrifying and exciting at the same time.
I think it's applicable, though. We talked last episode about how you were named one of the rising stars of 2020, for real, in Pocket Fives, and here you are closing out 2020 on WSOP on a big stage, and it was cool. It was crap. Both you guys did a great job. I was more behind the scenes doing the live updates. You guys were in front of the camera in varying degrees, but I was pretty impressed with how they pulled it off here. I came in thinking it's going to be really small, it's going to be a little unorganized, kind of haphazardly put together, but it was quite the opposite. They had it pretty well polished, and for me, it had enough of a flavor of the real main event during the summer, the final table, to leave me satisfied.
It did feel like real, didn't it? I mean, with so many people around, obviously you couldn't have family and friends on your actual rail, but I think the WSOP did a great job at staffing the event, and I think they set it up pretty well for all of us and all of the other media outlets.
I was super excited, too, not to have a swab stuck into my brain through the nose. Luckily, it was the throat swab instead.
I have a hot take on this.
Ooh.
I like the way up the nose swab significantly more than the throat swab.
Ooh, let's hear
I
it.
just
Why
don't like the throat swab. It's like they just make you gag.
It definitely felt like they were doing a little like, does this one have a gag reflex up here? I was like, yes, I do. I do. Ask my husband.
That kind of was part of my point. Yeah. And the nose
agree.
thing, it's uncomfortable, sure,
Not the
but
worst.
Doesn't make you gag.
Also, I don't understand what's the if this was always possible though, why did we start with the inside the brain one either? But that's neither here nor there. While you guys are talking, I'm also going to go on to, we usually don't stream on YouTube, we stream on Facebook, so I just want to check and make sure everything's running smoothly and things are going if I'm looking down at my phone. But I want to get into, I think first of all we should talk about the news about the sort of shift in scheduling and what's going on. We had anticipated staying here to play out the free roll tomorrow with Damian Salas, and I guess we can just, for those who don't know already, it was Joseph Hebert who won last night. But Chad, you kind of broke the news, from what I understand, in addition to Codigo Poker, about what went down. So
they were wrong. Chad was right.
Well,
I'm just saying.
Codigo Poker was the one to break the news that Damian Salas, who is Argentinian, was unable to get into the United States. And the reason for this was because of the new restrictions placed on being in Europe, where apparently there's a new strain of COVID kind of developing.
Mm-hmm.
They put in these restrictions that if you've been in Europe within the past 15 days, you cannot come into the United States. And Damian Salas had been in Europe, of course, winning the GG poker portion of the WSOP main event at King's Casino in the Czech Republic. Now, it's kind of important to remember that a lot of people say, well, the WSOP should have foreseen this. At the time, that 15-day restriction wasn't in place.
Yeah.
You know, this was a new recent development, so the WSOP has to deal with it. And so I know they worked diligently with Damian Salas, and they have found a way to get him to the United States. As far as I know, it's just delayed. You know, he wasn't going to be able to get here in time for tomorrow. Even if he flew in today, you don't want to fly him in from halfway around the world and expect him to play. You got to give him time to rest and get ready. So the plan for him, as I understand it, is to fly in on January 1st. He will arrive here in Vegas. He'll have about 30 hours to get acclimated and rest before playing heads up at 5 p.m. Pacific time on Sunday, January 3rd. So that is the plan. Hopefully there's no more delays or surprises between then and now. But come January 3rd, we should have a World Series of Poker main event champ with $1 million and the bracelet.
We thought Salas was just going to make that one day longer, but instead he's extended, the World Series of Poker by about a week or so.
And it'll also be that extra day.
And then that day will be very long. Yes.
But which is interesting because I'm interested to hear what you guys think about this, and I wonder if maybe he's trying to do what he can to prepare himself, physically for the jet lag now, because I've done this travel a lot, both to Latin America and to Europe, and I actually would say from my personal experience, the 30-hour mark is actually for me where things get the worst. I feel like you can kind of push through somehow, like the first day, and then like when you come into like the second day in the evening is when you're just like, I'm dead inside, like there's nothing. And in a cognitive function game, that could be a significant disadvantage for Damian.
And I'll say this, I don't know if either of you have ever been to Argentina. I was there once back in the day for the LAPT, and it's a much longer flight than I anticipated. You think, it's just South America.
Yeah.
It's just, but then you realize that you're going from the top part of the globe, and you have to go along around the long way down to the bottom part. So it's actually quite a bit longer than one would expect. And I just recall that as being one of the most exhausting flights that I had ever taken for PokerNews. And so obviously Damian Salas has taken it many times. He's been in the U.S. a lot and in Europe and stuff, so I'm sure he's a lot more used to it. But Sarah, I agree with you. You definitely got to give him a little window at least to recoup, and I'm glad they're trying to do that at least.
Because this will be a pretty intense heads-up match. I mean, it's not just for the $1 million, for the World Series of Poker and main event bracelet to be crowned world champion, but just looking at the structure, I mean, it's not something that, unless there's an absolute core, which kind of happened last night, which we'll get to, it's not something that's going to go by super quick. I mean, they are plenty deep. There are pretty long levels considering it's heads-up play, so this could go on a while. This could be mentally draining and physically draining, especially if you have that jet lag.
That sounds horrible, actually, because I was kind of hoping the whole thing went so fast last night. I was kind of hoping for more of that, and I actually find long heads-up matches to be my least favorite thing about poker.
I mean, from a live reporting perspective, heads-up matches is actually the most intensive, because the hands play out so fast, and we were doing hand-for-hand coverage that you were, if he just folded or did he raise and just fold, there's just so much real quick action in hands that it makes doing hand-for-hand updates during heads-up play very challenging. So
but
when
don't worry, Damian Salas will keep you.
Beat me to it.
Don't worry.
I was like, I just want to get in one more shot, but Sarah took care of it. Thank you.
I didn't want Damian to snub you. At some point, he's got to know this is just universal. We'll of course we will be back here to give you guys that live coverage, and hopefully Jeff will also be doing the sideline reporting, so we can just have a seamless kind of event. And we will, I'm imagining, do something also like this at that point to catch you guys up. Let's get into the nitty gritty of what went down. So we talked about things were actually pretty seamless. I was impressed by how smooth things ran. Although I think we've all been working with poker productions and around them for long enough to know they kind of know what's going on. They know how to do this. But what surprised me the most was how little went crazy. How little was surprising. How I feel like every WSOP main event final table, there's just the one hand where it's like things are like this on the turn, and then the river is something completely different, and it changes everything, and the chips exchange back and forth, and there's the one guy that doubles up 100 million times. But this was pretty much like there wasn't a whole lot of doubling up. There wasn't a whole lot of shifts.
Bear went wire to wire
Yeah.
as the chip leader, and it was never really even in doubt. I mean, when he made heads-up play against Ron Jenkins, he had a 2-1 chip lead, and so he was always comfortable there. I think if there was any surprise for me, and I guess maybe we should talk about what happened prior to the final table.
Sure.
The biggest surprise was that we started with 8 players as opposed to 9, and it was actually on the evening before the final table. So that would be Sunday night. Word started spreading that one of the players had tested positive for COVID, which of course means they would not be allowed to play in the event. They would take 9th place money. And Joey Ingram was on social media, kind of broke that story that Upeshka de Silva, the 3-time bracelet winner and really the biggest name at this final table, had tested positive. He was the 8 out of 9 players as far as the chips go, and he tested positive and was not allowed to play, deemed ineligible or disqualified or whatever you want to say. It was by the rules, but it caused certainly an uproar in the poker community and on social media. A lot of people with different takes, some saying that the WSOP should have done things differently, others saying, look, it sucks, but it was in the rules. And that's kind of where I lean, is towards the latter. Like, yeah, it's very unfortunate, but that was in the rules. They anticipated it. This is how it's going to be handled. And you go from there. I mean, we see it every week in different sports. Like I mentioned earlier in this show, the Cleveland Browns had their entire wide receiver core just all of a sudden, and then you just kind of have to adapt. And so I certainly feel bad for Upeshka de Silva. I had chatted with him before the final table. He was very excited, and going for bracelet number 4, I think it was a great story, but unfortunately, it didn't work out that way. And I'd be curious to hear your guys' take on that whole situation, because it certainly was the big story from Sunday night up to the start of the final table. Like, to me, it was like a ticking clock. Like, is there going to be some 24th hour, whatever that saying goes? Like, is he going to find a way to play?
Yeah.
Like, are they going to do another test? And maybe, I don't know, but it didn't work out that way. He did not end up playing, and so he officially finished in 9th place.
Go ahead.
Well, I want to ask you guys this, because when I interviewed Harrison Dobin last night, he is definitely a guy who does not mince words, says it like it is. And almost all the players had a very similar reaction when I asked them about Upeshka, which was, essentially, it's unfortunate. It's a sad thing. They were all very worried about it happening to them, but they were all just kind of like, well, this is like the nature of what we all agreed to. That being said, Harrison Dobin said, if it wouldn't have been Upeshka de Silva, I don't think that Twitter would have been in such an uproar.
Yes.
He said if it had been maybe Ryan Haggerty, okay, maybe Hags and maybe Upeshka, there's this big thing. But if it's any of the rest of us, nobody's worried. And I didn't even get into the Twitter stuff, but I'm curious what you guys think about that.
Well, I first of all, I agree with that. And I think Matt Berkey summed it up on Twitter. He said something to the effect of, I'm confused where the uproar lies here. We all knew the rules weeks ago. We all knew the rules before online play started, that if you made the final 9 and you showed up in Las Vegas and you either declined the COVID test for whatever reason or tested positive, then you're just out and you are disqualified and you finish in 9th place. And Berkey says, is the uproar just because we all like Pesh? Is the uproar just because he's a really well-known name? To your point, if Harrison gets it, sure, people are chatting about it on Twitter. Nobody's fighting for the World Series to change everything. Joey mentioned a couple of different things. He's like, well, maybe the players can come together, and if they all decide to not play. I mean, these are the rules. These are the rules that are in place. Joey also said that I heard there were flaws with the COVID protocols. I mean, we all went in and got tested. Seemed pretty smooth to me. Poker Central has done this plenty of times, to your point, with high-stakes poker, with Poker After Dark. It clearly was not the issue of a false positive, because Upeshka effectively admitted that he already had coronavirus at least a week ago or so. So I don't think there were any issues with the protocols that were put into place. It is a brutal blow for Upeshka de Silva. It's the absolute worst. It's the nightmare scenario, but the rules are very clearly stated before you start playing. And you postpone. Let's say you postpone 2 weeks. Does that guarantee
Does
everybody
someone
won't
else
have it?
get it?
Right.
That's
It's
the
just,
problem. It's
you just
such a
had to
thing
play it.
now.
You just
Yeah.
you just had to play it out. It sucks for him. It's brutal, but you just keep going. It's the world we live in now.
And it's not the absolute worst, because this is also something that Gershon Destenfeld mentioned to me last night. Is like, okay, yeah, this is like a really bad situation for him, but also he could have COVID really bad. He could be in the
Great
hospital,
point.
And be dying or whatever. He's like, you can definitely look at this a lot of ways, but
That's a
it's
great
like,
point.
it's really not the worst, situation, I guess, to be in.
And from the other players' perspective, and I would never expect them to ever admit this per se publicly, but I know certainly they were thinking it. They upped their equity.
Especially Harrison, our short
Yeah.
stack. It's like, hey!
27K, and also don't have to deal with, well, let's face it, Upeshka de Silva is a very dangerous player, very accomplished player, barring his short stack there, one of the favorites at the table. And so to not have to contend with that made their path, well, at least Joseph Hebert's, because he ended up winning it, path to victory a lot easier. And so it's unfortunate, but, that's the reality of the situation. And, the WSOP didn't want this. A lot of people were trying to blame the WSOP, which, in my opinion, was they just weren't. That just wasn't a right thing to do. The WSOP, with this whole putting on this event, wasn't trying to, in my opinion, make a big money grab. I know a lot of people say that, but if you look at the numbers, I just don't think it's there. There's the $1 million added for the eventual winner of the heads up. So, that's $1 million that's going out of the pocket. If you look at the production costs, and we've seen it here, a lot of people don't at home, but, they had a whole production set up, all the people that they got to pay. Now, I don't know the specifics, how, the ESPN deal is structured and things like that. So I really don't know all the money involved, but I just don't get the feeling, and some of the people I've spoken to seem to corroborate that they're just not making a lot of money on this, if any, to be honest.
Yeah.
And I just think they really had the best interest of the poker world at heart when they were putting on this event.
This individual event can not be too profitable, if profitable at all, to your point. Now, I think it's a great marketing tool of sorts. You get on ESPN, you promote the brand, you promote the brand new WSOP app, and I think it will end up being a profitable venture for them in the long run. But to say that this specific event was just a money grab, and that's the only reason that the WSOP did it, and they don't care about the players because look at this positive COVID test and he just gets eliminated tonight, I think that's the wrong track to go down.
Real quick, too, to talk about the setup that we had here, and then the point about suggesting that they had postponed this final table for Upeshka de Silva. There are a lot of reasons that couldn't happen, but one of them also is it's not easy to just delay to postpone a big setup like this, where you have, I don't know how many people were working on this event, probably 50-ish.
Yeah, at least.
And so to expect a lot of those who probably took time off, a lot of them are freelance, took time, Sarah, you traveled in, I traveled in. It's just there's a lot of logistics to pulling that off, and so to just try to postpone it willy-nilly is not an easy thing to do. So I knew immediately when that idea was suggested that there's zero shot that was ever going to happen.
Well, we moved right along, by the way. So Upeshka de Silva was the story for a little while, and there was all kinds of weird, I think, buzz and like underpinnings. I was really hoping it was going to become more dramatic. It seemed like it was going to become more dramatic, but that kind of all fizzled out, and the tournament, got off without a hitch, and then boom, like without anybody even noticing. Literally, I didn't hear anything. I didn't hear a ooh or an ah or anything. And then someone came up and said, okay, so are you going to go interview Gershon Distenfeld now? I was like, I'm sorry, what? Like, I just plugged my computer in. I don't know what's going on. So it was within 8 hands or something of play that Gershon busted, and he, I think he said in his exit interviews that he fully intended to play to win, and that was always going to be his strategy, that he was very aggressive. He found himself in 2 relatively marginal spots where he opted for the more, aggressive role. He said Jonathan Little is his coach and that he's going to go and find out whether or not he, played right or wrong, but that ultimately he was, disappointed to bust first, but that he was not sad in how things played out. And that was actually something, there was a couple players who mentioned maybe 1 or 2 spots where they felt like they had made a mistake, but that was something that really surprised me at this final table and doing all the interviews. Was almost all of the players said, I'm really happy with the way I played. I don't regret anything about the way I played. And I have to imagine having played poker and made plenty of mistakes in spots that I really regretted, that, you know, that's actually the worst thing. Like losing in a cooler spot or whatever is not the worst thing. The worst thing is making a mistake and hating yourself for it. So I was thinking, you know, this is kind of an awesome final table to end with, where pretty much everyone was really happy with how they played. Like that, I just don't, I feel like that's really unusual. Also, I think it's because a lot of time it takes a lot longer, and really on any given timeline, you're going to make a mistake.
Sure.
You're going to do something stupid you think about or regret. But I can only think Sean Stroke mentioned one hand where he actually couldn't remember the whole hand on camera, which happens. I think people get a little stressed out.
Sure.
And Joseph A. Bear said he had one moment against Michael Cannon where he got sort of into like a 3-bet and then like a re-raise spot, that he started feeling like something's wrong here and got out of that spot, but that he was worried there. And really, other than that, like everyone said, I played exactly how I wanted to play and it was perfect. Now, I wanted to ask you guys your thoughts, because for the last however many, maybe 5 years or 4 years or whatever it is, we've had the benefit, or I think it's a benefit of having the live stream 30-minute delay, so the players are able to then see if they made mistakes or not. And so I was wondering, do you guys think that not knowing actually what other players had made players feel better about their game?
Let me preface this, and it's just sprung to mind something I liked about this, and it kind of leads into this, and we'll go back to this real quick. But one thing I really liked that was really unique about this final table situation was the seat draw wasn't known beforehand.
Yeah.
Right? So
Great
they
point.
weren't able to prepare and say, oh, I've got this player on my left, so this is how I'm going to play. They did the seat draw right then and there, and to me, it just added this whole interesting dynamic that I wasn't really thinking about, you know, until it was happening, and I'm thinking, okay, so they went in order. So we had Joseph A. Bear, the chip leader, drew his seat first, and he got into seat 8. And then it was Sean Stroke was next, and he's the second biggest stack. He got seat 1, so that was exciting. He just got position on the chip leader. He gets to see how he acts, and then just to watch that unfold, I thought it was a very interesting dynamic. And then it takes away players, that advantage that they can gain. Yeah, with that knowledge. I wouldn't mind seeing that incorporated in other major final tables, to be honest. It was unique, it was different, it was exciting, and I think, especially with a television broadcast, it adds a new dynamic. Not only do you get the value of watching people draw their seats, which can be exciting, I think the action will be better because they haven't had time to develop a pregame plan of what they're going to do. They have to do it on the fly.
I also think that the tournament played pretty shallow. So for
Which
so
I
many of these, which is fantastic. And to Chad's point, it's great for action for television purposes, or if there were to be a live stream in the future. So a lot of these guys came into this knowing that about an hour or two into it, if they weren't short stacked already, then they'd probably be pretty short. So when you're playing in the 15 to 20 big blind range, I'm not saying it's not complicated. There are certainly many routes that you could go, but it is certainly less complicated than, say, playing 60, 70 big blinds deep, which we usually see at a main event final table. When it's so deep, that's when it takes a while. That's when you can get into many more tricky spots, I would say. And Chad, you can speak more on this because you saw
A bracelet on your
majority.
wrist one time.
Yeah. You're the bracelet winner. You reported on the majority of the hands, I would say, but most spots seem like, pretty
Standard.
quote unquote standard.
Yeah, there was, like Sarah said at the top, there was no real big, huge clashes. Anytime there was an all in, it was pretty standard. It was a short stack, got it in. I guess the one hand that really sticks out to me was fairly early on. It was Harrison Dobin got his chips in a 3-way pot. I think it was the Sean Stroke elimination hand as well. So I think it was Stroke had pocket 3s. Harrison Dobin had Ace King, and Ron Jenkins, I think was the other, had Queen. So it was Jenkins who this hand benefited because it was Sean Stroke jammed and re-jammed by Dobin, and then Jenkins wakes up with the queens and calls off. And so Jenkins wins that monster pot. Stroke is eliminated, and then Dobin took a big hit. And it was significant because Dobin had worked his way up from the short stack to actually, I think he got up to even maybe second or third in chips at one point. It was a comeback, and it was impressive, but then it got cut short by this hand. That also gave Ron Jenkins, who had been a short stack, the chips to make it all the way to heads-up play. And that was one hand that really kind of sticks out to me as kind of being very impactful. But yeah, everything else was pretty standard. It was just run of the mill.
That's something, though, it was when I interviewed Sean Stroke, something that he did speak about was he had Harrison Dobin directly on his left, whom he considered to be more or less a dark horse, but he thought that in that first, level-ish, almost 2 levels of play, that actually Harrison had showed the most aggression and been the most, like, chipping up the most, and he said, like, I'd keep my eye on him, maybe not realizing that he had also been completely crippled in that hand, because then actually when I was interviewing Sean, Harrison came in as busted out. So Sean was like, okay, well, like, ignore all that stuff about him. But yeah, I think that was, of course, the big three-way all in. But even in that spot, I mean, I guess the only thing you could say is maybe, but because the players are so short, like maybe some players are not rejamming the queens there. What do you guys think about jamming queens in that spot? I don't know. Like, I think because the other 2 players are so short, everyone's so short, like you can't really.
Yeah, you said it. I think when you look down at queens in that spot with the way that this tournament has been playing, Harrison is aggressive. Even if Harrison wasn't aggressive, I think you look down at 2 queens and you're probably going to put the chips in, especially if you're Ron Jenkins, who, let's be honest, the guy does not care about pay jumps.
Right.
He's not in this for the ICM implications.
The pay jumps in this final table were actually, you wanted to get to the top 3 spots,
Sure.
really to the top 2. You become a poker millionaire if you get to the top 2. So you had 1.5 up top, you had $1 million for second, and third was $530,000. And so those are big pay jumps. But then when you go down to the rest, you had, I'm looking at it right now, $215,000 for sixth, up to $286,000. So a $70,000 pay jump roughly. It is big, of course, but it's just, in my opinion, you do what like Ron Jenkins kind of did, and you play for the win, or you play to get towards the top. And so yeah, if I have queens in that spot, I'm definitely going with it, and it paid off. He avoided the the ace and the king, and no 3 for the set, so he won a monster there.
Sorry to interrupt. I think another interesting hand and interesting moment came between the 2, quote unquote, best friends at the table, in Ryan Haggerty and Michael Cannon, when Hags got it in with ace king against Michael Cannon's ace queen straight on the board. They chop it up, and Ryan Haggerty ended up being eliminated in 4th, just wondering, what could have been if that ace king holds up against his buddy, Michael Cannon.
I wanted to talk to you guys about something that I think a lot of the players mentioned, and that we did talk to Joseph Hebert about as well, was that most players were expecting him to come out the gate significantly more aggressive in the first hour or 2 than he did. That maybe he was playing slightly, more passive than they had expected. And in that spot, actually, I would say, for example, Gershon's strategy, had the cards played out a little bit different, might have really changed the dynamics of the table or changed how things went. And, when I interviewed Joseph, he did mention that he was feeling pretty uncomfortable at first. The lights, the whole thing, it's a lot, and that he really wanted to ease in. I can definitely see not wanting to make a mistake when you know that you're uncomfortable. But then he also said, and, it's like hard to tell always, is this true or not true? He also said, well, I knew everyone expected me to come in and play really aggressively, so I also thought maybe I could throw them off a little bit and let them come at me a little bit by, playing it more soft. And I think for me, it was much easier to believe the first part than the second. But what did you guys think about that strategy, if you will?
I'll say it with Hebert, when that first hand kicked off, I seen him taking a drink, and I said to Mo Nuaro, who's doing the updates next to me, I'm like, is he drinking a beer? I was so excited. Like, people take it so serious all the time, and here you have the chip leader, even before play began, is having a beer. And there's no bar down here in the Rio area where we're at in the convention center right now, not like usually is during the summer. There's nowhere to get a beer really around here, not too easily. And I found out after the fact that prior to the final table, that Hebert was having a conversation, and this was, I heard secondhand, so I can't verify this, but was having a conversation with Jack Effel. And as you said, Hebert was nervous. It was clear, and I think Jack said, is there anything I can do to help out or make this easier? Anything I can do for you, basically. Yeah. And Hebert said, can you get me a beer? And Jack Effel made it happen. And so yeah, I was impressed that he was having a beer there. And I think with Hebert, just knowing him, getting to know him since he's made this final table, knowing his story with his mother, knowing that people expected him to come in, probably try to leverage that chip lead, I do think that there was a good chance he did think, you know what, let me just come in. I'm not going to force anything. I'm not going to force the action. I'm just going to let it come to me. And it reminds me, he told me that his mother in that last text to him said, "What will be will be."
Yeah.
And so maybe that was his philosophy. He's just going to come in. He's not going to force anything, and what will be will be. And what came is him finishing on top.
And I think it's also important when he's developing his own strategy going into this final table. He's not playing against 7 pros. As we mentioned, there are a couple guys there who really don't care about ICM. So it's going to probably lessen your aggression as chip leader when you have a couple guys in Jenkins and Distenfeld who are really there to play for the win. Harrison Dobin, another guy who's there saying that they aren't looking just to ladder up. They aren't just looking for those pay jumps. So when you have those guys in the mix, it changes your whole strategy as it's just different than what would be a normal chip leader at a tournament. And Bear told me that he did have 2 beers before he even came downstairs for the final table. So that's our guy right there.
It makes you wonder how the Upeshka de Silva disqualification played into it too.
Yeah.
Because if I was at that final table, I would have assumed, okay, Upeshka is he's a crazy aggressive player. He's coming in on a short stack, but the money doesn't probably, it means something to him, but he probably wants to win this. So he might be the one that's coming in, and I'm expecting him to be the aggressor.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden he's removed, he's taken off the board. He's no longer in play.
Hashtag
and then,
for Linda. Linda was
Yes.
like, we don't need that fool
Right.
there.
but then nobody stepped up to assume that aggressive role. Like, okay, let me be the one to kind of control that. Maybe Gershon would have been that person, but like you said, he busted on hand number 6, and he lost most of his chips on hand number 5, and lost the rest in hand number 6. So we'll never really know. I'll say in regards to him though, he got $125,000, which he's donating all that to various charities.
So cool.
Which I think was very very cool of him.
I think he represents the game very well, not only for that, but just the way he handled all the spotlight going into it. He was terrific with all of us. Any media obligation that he had, he was fantastic with. And then before he left the tournament room, he walked around to all of the staff members, everybody on the crew, and he said thank you. So just to every single person, thank you, thank you. It's just a really appreciative guy. He loved the moment.
He texted me today. He said, "Hey, can you give me Sarah's email? I want to
That's
contact
the kind
Sarah."
of guy he is.
Yeah, he reached out to Sarah and sent you a nice note, I understand.
Yeah, he was just really lovely. And, I said a little thank you to him after he busted, because all of us in the poker media and the poker community, I think, have really an obligation to be grateful for any press that we get, especially
Yes.
good press in the
Yes.
mainstream media. And so having somebody like him, who I saw several articles and things out there in, less traditional, when I say mainstream media, I mean non-poker media.
Yeah. We'll take it.
Yeah, exactly. Like just put it out there somewhere. But that he really, I think, represented poker in a great way, and we could always use more of that. And I actually would say, in all of the guys, interviewing them afterwards, with very few exceptions, I think all of them represented poker very well. And even the exceptions, I kind of can understand and get that too. But when speaking to Tony Yuan, for example, I was really impressed with he said, I'm working on my own strategy, and I'm developing, he's, a mathematics guy and a probability guy working on his PhD. And he said, I'm, working on my own strategy, and, I'm not 3-betting in this spot. I'm not 3-betting in this spot, which, normally people do. And it filled me with, some sense of hope or something for the poker world to know and see that there's these new players coming in who are willing to say, I'm not going to just go with whatever everyone says is the GTO or the right way to play. I'm going to put in the hours and the work and come up with my own ideas. And he said he was very happy with his play. Ryan Haggerty said, in his bust out, he felt great about what happened. He felt great about getting fourth. I think for so many players, quite often when you do these bust out interviews, they're just devastated, and understandably so, but It's very hard to just be around them sometimes. Like, they just hate you and want to leave. And so many of these players, they were just warm and happy. Michael Cannon was like, 3rd place is great. I'm super happy with it. And I think that goes back to what we've talked about. It could have gone a lot of different ways because of how short stacked a lot of the players were. I think they all came in with less expectations maybe and slightly less pressure than a lot of the other final tables we've seen, because they knew a lot of this is going to be up to variance. And I think it created a sort of air of gratitude. that doesn't
Yeah.
usually exist.
That they appreciated the moment.
Yeah.
I was talking to 2017 champ Scott Blumstein a couple days ago
Ugh,
because
I love
he's
him.
good friends with Ryan Haggerty, with Michael Cannon, and he mentioned that he had spoken with each of them over the last couple weeks, not about specific strategy, not about what to do with their current stack size, but Scott said his main tip to them was just soak it all in. Like, you're at the final table of the World Series of Poker main event. Is it a different kind of main event? Sure, whatever. You're still at the Rio. It's still the World Series. There's still a bracelet up for grabs. There's still a ton of money out there. You're still on ESPN, and just soak it all in. And, we talked a little while ago about Michael Cannon, not being the most comfortable in the world with interviews and admitting that and still giving us all the time in the world. And yesterday he walked in and he said, you know what, I may be nervous. This may give me some extra anxiety, but this is part of me appreciating the moment and soaking it all in. I thought that was so cool. Your guy, Tony, out of Wisconsin, I mean, he kept apologizing for his English, but he's the nicest guy in the world. And another guy, he had a smile on his face literally the entire time, and I just love to see it.
I'm gonna invite him to a home game or something.
Yes,
Get Mark
he'll
Poker
crush you
Brew.
guys. Yeah.
And he could come in and test his strategy theories out on us. But he lives in Madison, just down the road from me. I was certainly excited for him, and I actually thought at the final table he played very tight, very patient, was waiting for his spots, and I think he busted in fifth, if I recall correctly. And it was around that point where he got it in against, he was short stack, he got it in against Bear and hit the river to double up. And now he was still short, but he had just doubled his stack. And in the very next hand, he got it in again against Bear. And he had ace king against Bear's pocket fours, so a classic race. And if he were to win this one, he was actually going to be sitting pretty decent in chips. And not only that, Bear would take another hit. He would have gotten rivered, and then he would be losing a flip. And so I thought that was a pivotal moment. If Yuan would have won that hand, it might have been a momentum swinger. It might have maybe thrown Bear off his game a little bit, losing those back-to-back hands, and knocking him down in chips a little more, getting Tony back up there. But of course, that didn't happen. The pocket fours held, and Tony was out in fifth place, and Bear extended his chip lead and went on to win. But I think that is one moment at the final table I would identify as like a what-if moment. What if Tony Yuan had won that hand? What could it have meant? And obviously, we'll never know, but it certainly, it was one of those pivotal points, in my opinion.
One of the things that I think I really enjoyed that I'll just throw out there, because of course there was lots of things that made this not the ideal situation for everyone, but one of the things I've noticed, especially as we've gone in the last few years, where the play has just continued and continued and continued, and there really isn't very much of a break in between, crowning a champion and starting the main event. The players had so much energy, and like some of it was nervous energy, obviously. Some of it was, I think, relief that they didn't have the COVID, which they said most of them had been sweating so hard the last 2 weeks. But, by the time we get to that point in the WSOP main event, they've been bombarded by the media a million times. They've already done a ton of ESPN interviews. They're exhausted. They've played a ton of 14-hour days back to back. And in this spot, it had such a different vibe, because I think the guys just came in with more energy. Like, they were just willing to do the interviews and were very, I think, authentic in those moments because they weren't so haggard.
I really liked
us too.
That's true. I really liked the 2-week break, right? Like, I thought maybe that was perfect. To build plenty of hype, but to not put in too much of a pause into play where you forget about it. Like, there's a lot of hype right after you hit the final table, and then there's a week hype, and then everybody goes silent for 2 months, and then we're back at it again a week before the final table. 2 weeks?
It's perfect.
Kind of perfect. Now, I know in today's day and age, it's all about the live stream and having that on ESPN, ESPN2 in the summer. So that might be a little strange with the 2-week break, but I kind of thought, we can't take too much from a 2020 main event. I kind of liked this idea of hitting the final table, giving us a week or two of a break, but also to build some hype around it. I wouldn't mind if that stuck around in the future.
I definitely, I liked that also. And I think, obviously, we've been going already for 40 minutes. We can't go too much longer, but, before we go, I want to talk a little bit about how lucky we were to have Joseph Bear as the champion.
Yeah.
I think that was just, for me, and I mentioned that Ty, a literal tear last night, okay? Ty Stewart. There was a little. I'm sorry, Ty, if you're watching.
Busted.
I'm letting this all out there, but he came in and he just said, these are the moments that really I love about poker. And I always say that, and I think probably all of you here can share that, I love that there's so many brilliant minds. I love that there's so much logic in this game. I love that, I think there's a ton of just wonderful people in this game. But the thing that has made me the privilege of my career in this industry has been sharing those few and far between life-changing moments with players as they win bracelets or main events or whatever. And I can remember almost all of them that were so intense and powerful. And I fully was, and I'm very hormonal and all that, of course, but like I think I cried 2 or 3 times, like watching his interviews on ESPN, doing the interviews with me, watching him tear up, talking about buying his dad a truck, which he said his mom would want him to do, and listening to him. He called his fiance before we started the live stream to see if she would watch it, and like his kid is in the background, and his fiance is like, "I love you so much, baby." Like I'm so, and I'm just like I could empathize, I could imagine what it feels like to be in that moment and be home waiting for him, and there would have been a lot of great champions, but I think we were really, really lucky to have Joseph win this.
I agree. I've gotten to know him. I reached out to him. I think it was the first interview I did of the people who made the final table.
Yeah.
Said it was the first interview he ever did. He was really nervous. He nailed it. It was on the PokerNews podcast if you want to go back and listen to it. And he's just got a natural charm. He's got a great story, and he's obviously got a lot of skill. I think he's going to be around the poker world for a long time. Now, regardless if he beats Damian Salas and wins the bracelet and becomes the official main event champion, if he does, I think he's going to be a great ambassador for the game. He's really going to be somebody who's out there and willing to embrace it. Even if he doesn't, if he ends up losing and Damian Salas becomes the champ, I still think we're going to see Hebert around for a long, long time. I think he's got a bright future in the poker world, and this is life-changing. This is life-changing on not only a financial level, but I kind of think like on a spiritual level with everything going on with his mom and those sort of emotions that he probably has had to deal with over the last 6 months or whatever it's been, and is still dealing with because of all this. And I remember when they had the heads up break last night, everybody was getting prepared, and I was exiting the Amazon room to go use the restroom, and as I'm walking out towards this corner exit, there's nobody else around except for one person pacing, and I get closer, and I notice it's Joseph Hebert, and I didn't say anything. I could have, but I could tell it was a very personal moment. He was kind of looking up at the ceiling, and I could tell he kind of had tears in his eyes, that he is heads up, and I'm sure having that private conversation in his head with his mom or something along those lines. And I came back, and it was that one hand, and he even said in his interview that he knows his mom was looking out for him on that hand, or looking over him, and it just was such a fitting end. And like Sarah said, just very emotional, and it's those moments in poker that are so very special.
There is something to be said for how genuine of a human being Joseph Hebert is, and we all know that now that we've gotten to know him a little bit. To further Chad's story, before they did start heads up play, I saw Hebert wandering, still in the Amazon room, but kind of in the corner, and I think he really lost it for a minute. Just the way he was able to keep his emotions in check. I can't imagine the type of roller coaster ride he was on, but to go from really losing it before heads up and then to kind of to center himself, to sit back down, to take a deep breath, to say we're good to go. I thought he played so well. He kept the emotions in check, but then he was just real with all of us, and you can express emotion even when you're playing poker in 2020. That's allowed. We'll allow it, and we look for that.
And I think we will embrace it.
Yeah, we will embrace it. And so, we throw around the word ambassador in different ways, but I do think he's a terrific representative of our game. That's certainly what I'll take away from this final table.
And it was interesting listening to the Caesars team, like the media relationship team, trying to put together their, their media alert or whatever they put out at the end, and breaking down every single word and thing, and should we say this and that, and I was just cautiously eavesdropping and listening, and something Hebert had mentioned in our interview also was that he had worked on and off for about 10 years at a seafood restaurant in Louisiana, and I think on a personal level I empathize with that. I've worked in the service industry also, which can be very difficult and stressful, and it's very much sometimes a thankless job. And he mentioned in there that he wanted to like give a big shout out to them. They'd always been really supportive of his poker career, that they had given him time off so that he could go to these events and do things. And that he had mentioned to Caesars, if you could mention, you know, this restaurant that I've worked at, like I would really appreciate it. And I just was thinking how lovely, you know, that first of all, that he's sort of this blue collar, if you will, or someone, he said, you know, I've got to make ends meet. I've been trying to play poker, but I've got to do this stuff. But also that when you get there, when you make it, when you're sort of at the top in the moment, like getting the limelight, that you're like, hey, I really want to make sure to shine some spotlight also on this place that's supported me or whatever. I just was like, dude, this guy is so legit. And I'm listening to those Caesar people like try to figure out like, how can we make this seem natural and like fit this in, and you know, and I just like I was just so impressed.
It's Galley Seafood in Metairie, Louisiana.
Metairie.
Yeah.
I couldn't remember where it was.
It's like it's the same as New Orleans, basically. Yeah. But yeah, they should put up a winner's photo of him inside the restaurant somewhere. Make it a little destination for poker players when they visit NOLA to go in there and get some dinner and maybe take a picture with the picture. I don't know. But it's very cool because he was very passionate about that. He mentioned it in every interview.
Yeah.
I know the next time I'm down that way, I'll check it out. So
same here.
He's doing
And
him a favor.
we're all going to be very unbiased and very professional when it comes to this heads-up match as far as who we're rooting for, right? All that.
And I feel so bad because Damien's like actually he's super like the nicest guy. He's just so nice. But I think, right, we all know also like he's, I think, pretty wealthy. If I understand his like economic situation, he owns like several businesses, and of course it would be great if he wins. But also, I think that's one of the things in this final table that surprised me, because I feel like every now and then, maybe like 10% of the time, the story, the really like heartwarming story is the champion, but like 90% of the time, it's just not. It's just not. Like somehow it just doesn't work out that way. And I remember after I watched your interview with Bear on the podcast, I was like, man, there's no way. Like, it's just too good. The story's too good. Like this guy is too warm feeling and wonderful. And yeah, we just got lucky.
It's got shades of a moneymaker Farha battle, right?
Yeah,
this satellite winner, and Bear got in to this to the WSOP.com main event by a $300 satellite. Now he's got 1.5 million, by the way. And so you have this satellite winner with such a great story, and he's never been on that big stage before. Whereas on the flip side, you have Damien Salas, who is a very experienced professional, very successful in life. He's been on this stage before. He was at the 2017 World Series of Poker main event final table. And so it's kind of got that shades of amateur versus seasoned professional, even though Bear's not an amateur by any means. He's very experienced. You know, he had, I think, around $650,000 in live tournament earnings, according to Hennen Mob, prior to this big win. So he's been around. He just hasn't had those opportunities and, you know, taking those big shots, or maybe he's taken the big shots. They just haven't paid off like they did here in 2020.
This is the advantage of having the produced/edited episodes, right? Where you can really tell this story, where it's not all about the poker. You know, in the live streams are great. I know a ton of people enjoy the live streams. I'm one of them. But the live streams are very poker heavy, right? It's every single hand. Here, they're going to be the big hands, the action-packed hands, which are entertaining. But we're also going to be able to learn more about a Joseph Bear. And I think that really is a positive thing for poker and can reach more of an audience.
Yeah, ESPN better send somebody down to the Galley Seafood in Metairie. Like,
yes,
and,
right?
like,
And that could be me.
Manager. Yes. Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Yes.
I want to see. I want to see the life
yeah.
behind these guys.
And you
That's a
want to
great
meet
idea.
his dad. I want to see his dad, and you know, I'm sure he's gone through the struggles too. And what a perfect answer. And I even said to Bear last night, you know, I never asked this. It's such a tired question. Like, I think when you very first started in poker, you're like, so what are you going to do with the money? Because you don't understand anything about anything. But in this spot, you know, when you go from working in a restaurant, you know, to like more than $1 million, I think it's fair to say, so, you know, have you thought about things? What's going on? And the first thing he said, I was keying it up because he said his son told him if he won, he was going to buy him a bird. I wanted him to, talk about his son and this bird and whatever. And he said, no, I know. I'm going to buy my dad a truck. Like, I'm going to buy my dad a car or whatever, a truck, a car, something. And he's like, that's what my mom would want. And my dad's had such a hard year. We've both had such a hard year. And, and I was thinking, that's kind of the stuff I think we all think about when you're like, if I won the lottery, like, well, I'd buy my mom a house or like whatever you would do, and $1 million is $1 million. It's a lot, but it's also not, like you're not going to live your whole rest of your life probably on it. But to already have thought like, man, what I really want to do is buy my dad a vehicle. I was like,
That's cool.
I love this guy, dude. We love you. Joseph, I'm sure you're sleeping. That's like, or whatever you're doing, hanging out with your family, but we love you. We're super excited. Anything else we should talk about before we let everybody go?
Just that we'll be bringing the updates from the Heads Up finale. Remember, it's January 3rd, 5 p.m. Pacific time. There is no live stream, so Poker News updates will be your only bet if you want to follow the action. But we'll be there. We had to adapt. We had to call some audibles, but we will be here. We're going to have to go through the COVID testing again, and as do the players, which is an interesting thing. We're just assuming they're both going to pass.
True.
They already did, but a lot can happen in that downtime. So that would be a
especially flying from
nightmare,
Argentina. I can't imagine how many people you come across in your.
I think the good news for them, though, in this, there's no huge money implications because I don't think it's you catch COVID, we're just going to give the $1 million to the other guy, right? This is.
Why not?
I mean, that would that'd certainly be interesting if they.
Do we have a contention plan for if one of them tests positive? What do we do?
I mean, I think the plan is probably postpone.
I'm not flying
again,
back here like
and
4
times.
times.
They really hope that doesn't happen. I think that's probably the plan. But.
They're just like, this better not happen. Actually, it's funny, when I was flying here, I saw this guy in the airport who was fully in like a whole suit, right? And he had like the mask, but it was a whole suit with gloves and everything. And I mean, I thought a lot of things about it. Like, how does he even get his ID out to do things? Like, where is he keeping his ticket? But then I thought, if I was one of these guys and I was flying here, I would also be wearing that suit probably.
With that much money on the line? Yeah.
I'm either like driving or I'm wearing the suit. So I hope they've got it. And even, when Joseph came through here last night to do the stream interviews, I guess a lot of the people in this room didn't have to get tested or something like that. And even Ty was like, I don't know, maybe he shouldn't even walk through this room. But you're walking through the hotel, you're walking through everywhere. I mean, it's tough. And we're sorry, Upeshka, I'm sure you're watching this also, and we are sorry about this situation, but we'll be there for you guys. Of course, you can watch us on PokerNews.com. In February, you'll be able to watch Jeff's beautiful face on ESPN2. Is that where they put it out?
I think the plan is for the mothership, for ESPN. I think that's the plan.
That makes sense. There were probably a lot of sports and stuff didn't complete their seasons or something. There's a lot of space available.
Maybe the sports talk. You should just get to the end of the poker show.
Okay, just kidding, everyone. All right, well, we super appreciate you guys being with us, of course, and we will, hopefully do another one of these very shortly. And yeah, good luck to everybody out there. Chad Holloway, Jeff Platt, deuces.